Thank you very much. It's all so very confusing. I've been on vacation, I can tell. Okay, let's call this meeting to order at 6:03 and a half. And, Pam, could we get a roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Welcome back. Jackie Whitsitt.
Yes, thank you.
Carrie Tenenbaum, absent. Bill Infante's out. Katie Schwer.
Here.
Anya Schindler is out. Jennifer Riffle. And Slack.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to quickly just read our little intro statement, which is Basalt is an inclusive, sustainable mountain community that boasts both historic charm and progressive vision. It's an engaging place to live, work, and play while offering an abundance of creative, professional, educational, and recreational outlets, and all those are represented right here in this room, I'm positive. Also, I want to thank Grassroots for recording our meetings. If you are not listening live, you can listen later. Of course, you can't hear me now at grassroots.org. Tomorrow morning at Starbucks at 8 o'clock, we host Mayor's Coffee. I will be there. Sometimes our town manager is there. Sometimes the police chief is there. It's a surprise. So, on that note, our first item is the consent agenda. And is there a motion or questions on the consent agenda?
I'd like to make a comment that continuing the September 25th, 2018 public hearing and resolution for the Basalt River Park LLC application, that in general, I recognize that this was possibly participated in a bit by counselors not being able to attend tonight's meeting when this originally was scheduled for. And I feel that we're all going to miss a meeting, and to reschedule and postpone is unfair or not so respectful for those of us who do show up, because there's going to be other meetings where we're not going to be there. And how is it decided when they should be continued and not?
Good question. I think that we should consider that more seriously from here on out. And because we do have some folks who can't make it sometimes because of professional reasons or for whatever reason. So maybe we should just say, if we've got a quorum, we go. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes and no. I think for something as critical as that conversation, being that we're lacking almost half of our council, I would appreciate having our entire council for something that is of that magnitude to our community, and that we've been talking about for, it seems like decades.
It has been decades.
Yeah.
It's getting very close to decades. I guess the only other thing I would say is that we could go on an entire summer and put an applicant off because we can't all manage to be here. So do you have another thought, Brian?
Well, no, I just thought that was there's a.
That was so loud.
Yeah, maybe we made a.
Sorry. Make sure that your mic is close so I don't have to turn up the volume. Thank you.
Is that close enough?
Well, everybody just bring it a little closer.
Okay. I think maybe we made a special exception for this one because people spoke up when we were continuing it, saying they wouldn't be here. But I do agree it is not helpful for the people that are bringing in forward for a timely process. So,
you know, not that we want to belabor this all night with people sitting here waiting, but maybe most of these people know they're going to be gone. I mean, almost everybody, unless you're in a car wreck or sick, you know you're going to be gone. So how about we just say that at the meeting, you make a motion and see if you can get a majority to say we're going to keep taking this off, because otherwise it's just Ryan and I just deciding, which is fast and efficient, but it may not be the fairest.
but this one we talked about that during the meeting.
Oh, I wasn't here, so.
No, well, no, we talked about it during.
Like a month ago.
When we were discussing it and
Yeah.
we said we were pushing it to September 11th, multiple council members spoke up to say they wouldn't be here. They were very concerned about not being able to share their thoughts because that meeting did run very late and we weren't able to speak out, so.
Okay, noted on all sides.
Just a great discussion piece. So on that, Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second?
Okay, my only thing is I would like to abstain from just the minutes, but I guess I'll abstain from the whole thing because I wasn't here. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstain. Okay, so that passes. Our next item is the public call to action. This is where we allow people in the audience to make statements to the council for items that are not on the agenda. So I will just add to that, that we would like to ask that people limit their comments to 3 minutes and address your comments directly to the mayor, me. Identify yourself by name and address when making comments. Comments should be courteous, civil, and constructive. Town council will not make decisions or take actions on these comments because they're not posted on the agenda, so we really can't, except to direct the town manager to work with somebody regarding this. So, pardon me 1 second. I'm just gonna sit here and snip. I won't do this. We also would like to encourage any positive comments and gratitudes you have about living in the town of Basalt. That's not mandatory, you don't need to do that. So at this time, members of the public, please feel free to come to the microphone, or you can sit down at the table if that's more comfortable, and make your comments. Anybody have? Okay. Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
I'm Rich Grant, Homestead Drive. I know you've beaten to death the fire and the shooting range and all that stuff, but I had some comments because I know there are a lot of counselors that live north of Soapers Drive in the fire zone, as one guy called it. And that's the wildland interface. You're part of the wildland, and that's a danger no matter what, where the fire starts. It was an accident caused by humans at the range. I understand, I was told that they were actually shooting north of the normal shooting range along with shooting tracers. That was irresponsible. It's not any less irresponsible to throw a cigarette out on Cedar Drive. I think with the easterly winds we had that night on July 3rd, a cigarette on Cedar Drive would have been a lot more devastating because the Cedar Drive, Ridge Road, and the Wilds are all in the fire zone. They would have been impacted. There would have been maybe no way to save those houses. Those houses are in the fire zone. They need to be mitigated. Maybe Bill will watch this later, but I know for a fact the top hydrant in Ridge Road has a normal operating pressure of 32 pounds. Doesn't have enough fire flow to put out the large buildings that are up there. One of the former building officials approved for his friend a 5,000 square foot house up there, but one of the reasons it was restricted is because they don't have the fire flow for it. So there are a lot of problems because of where you live, and a guy dragging a trailer up there to do maintenance work and the spark goes flat, sparks could have started a fire. And it's not just the shooting range. It wasn't the shooting range that started, it was human error. Wanted to make that point. The other part of it is I want to make sure the council doesn't narrow their focus too much. I know Councilor Riffle mentioned that a tourist had said bicycles and fishing are what Basalt is. Well, they've been logging since they chased the youths out here. And one of the reasons they did log is because all the roads and trails that bicyclers use now were built by loggers. The Forest Service managed that so they could have roads in for access for firefighting, and the cost of this thing would have been less if they'd have had roads built, but public wouldn't allow them to build the roads. And I know you had mentioned that you wanted a paid person at the range to be a range master. Now, you didn't want any volunteers, and I think that's a little too much. And if you want to make those kinds of demands, I think it only also follows that maybe you should be willing to help pay for a paid person. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Other comments for items not on the agenda?
Stacy Kraft, I live in Basalt. And you guys may have seen in the paper this Lift One Lodge that's being going before council in Aspen. And I just wanted to bring your attention to that because I think it's such a good project, and it shows what could be possible down in the Pan and Fork, or what's been proposed at the Pan and Fork looks like something that would happen on a college campus, a bunch of dorms with an alleyway in between them. It's not very inspired looking. This one, you know, incorporates a lot, it's hard to see, but it incorporates a lot of design features of buildings that were already there. The town got a concession to bring the chairlift even further down down into town to create a true legacy project and to create more recreation opportunities, and that's gonna help us keep World Cup up there and stuff. But they talk about this as a public-private partnership and concessions that the town got out of the developers. And I would just encourage you to really massage that we can do so much better than these, you know, square buildings with an alleyway in between them. We're gonna end up with something that looks like Gold Rivers, which is not a very attractive, engaging thing. There's nothing about this that draws people down into the river from that development. And we could have something better, and that's how development works. A developer comes in, tells you what they want to do, you come back, tell them that you want something better, something that's legacy oriented, something that brings in, draws people into that property and engages people for the long haul. So I would hope that you'd reach out to the people that are working on that project and just see call your peeps in Aspen and ask them how they did it. So, because it's a really nice looking project.
Thank you, Stacy. Other comments for items not on the agenda? Good evening, Mr. Kerr.
Good evening. I know you guys are probably getting tired of listening to me, but this is on a positive note. I just want to say how nice the town of Basalt is when there's not raining down with shotguns 7 days a week. And now that the smoke is cleared, biking is good again, and I remember this town as it is now, much more peaceful. And I hope we can work towards that goal going forward. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Any other comments? Hello, Mr. Belinsky.
Hi, Tim Belinsky, an applicant on River Park. Jen, I was here mainly just to be available in case there was anything that came up tonight, and appreciate your comment about extending. I wanted everybody to know that with the extension of time that we have had, we've been working pretty hard in terms of managing some expectations, looking for improvements, meeting with lots of people for the River Park schematic plan that's been presented. So I thought I'd let you know that we've been taking advantage of that time. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Anybody else? Okay, so let's close that section of the meeting and go to mayor and council comments and reports. And I want to go first because I've been gone, and we came close to some very positive comments this evening already, but I just want to say, when I left, there was still some smoke hanging in the air, and when I came back, it seems to be gone, and it made me super grateful for the fact, again, that we didn't lose any lives in this fire, and we didn't lose as much property as we might have, and it was just nice to be home. And it was awfully nice to leave, too, when it was still smoky. So that's all I really have. Jen?
I'm going to have some gratitude. So I am so grateful that we have not had mudslides with the amount of rain that we have had. That's amazing, and I'm so grateful for Mother Nature and all the other items that roll into that, and may that continue on indefinitely. I am very grateful for the town of Basalt sending Rob Bob to walk door to door and hand out flyers in the Hill District for the fire mitigation project. That's an amazing opportunity. And for all of you living on the Hill District, please consider the invitation to participate. I'm not going to say take advantage, but this is an incredible advantage for our community. So please utilize it. I am so grateful for all the firefighters who are still fighting the fire. The fire's not out. That's something that we need to keep in consideration. It's still going. This has been a tremendously impactful, and so I'm still grateful for all the people out there managing it. And that's my gratitude.
Thanks. I guess you're on the hook, Ryan, for
I
some
am.
gratitude
I have,
or something.
well, I am gonna take advantage of the program that the town is offering for fire inspection, so I'm very grateful for that. But I did want to give you a quick update from the Root Eye Water and Power Authority. I had my first meeting, and it was wonderful. We brought in the new chairwoman, April Long, and I think the authority's in great hands. We prepared a letter for Ryan Zinke on the Endangered Species Act. We had an update from a guy from the Forest Service and the bear response team, which was very interesting. They're doing a lot of work still up there, but it's good and bad. Some soils burn better than others, and so that was very interesting. And then the program at Root Eye Reservoir has been doing wonders. They've had over 750 boat inspections this year, little decrease from last year. They did find 2 boats with mussels. They were contained, which is wonderful. So it shows that everything we're doing to prevent mussels at Root Eye is working. And yeah, that was really it.
And I just wanted to thank you, Ryan, for taking over that responsibility, because that is one of the beefier committees to sit on. They are extremely technical in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of work to do on that committee, so thank you very much.
Yeah, and here's an action plan too, if anyone's interested on some of the stuff they're working on.
Thanks, Ryan.
I'm good.
Katie? Okay. I'm sure it must be time for Ryan Mahoney to speak. The magnificent Ryan Mahoney.
It is. So a couple updates, and then we're going to do an update on our second quarter financials for you, and we'll keep that brief. But so just briefly, I went to, last Friday, I attended the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commissioners meeting down in Glenwood. And my point for going, we had heard at our last meeting when we adopted the resolution, there was some concern on the part of CPW staff that we were somehow hampering or front-running their process as it related to the 2 public meetings they had had. And we had turned out our resolution draft prior to the second meeting, which just by the way the packets fall, that was kind of a necessary thing for us to do. But wanted to appeal to the commissioners that our intent for doing that was really in response to our constituency within the town of Basalt, and relayed to them the impact of the fire on the people in Basalt, and that we felt it was important for us, and that we had indeed listened to a number of folks, emails in the dozens, as well as feedback at the CPW meetings and CPW staff here locally as to what their intent was after the first few meetings, and hoped to just allay any fears that we were trying to take over on what they had done. And so I got a little bit of feedback from them that they were still a bit uncomfortable with the resolution, feeling it was a little heavy-handed, and I just kind of left it at that and just took their comments. So I did ask them if they could share with us what their next steps would be in the process. They did not have information that day specifically related to that, but that said perhaps this week they would be able to release some of that information. So as soon as I get that from them, I will pass it along to you all. Jennifer mentioned that the town, in concert with a few of the different fire agencies, we have State Forest, we have the Basalt Fire, as well as Eagle County, are helping us out with a fire mitigation project up on the hill. We took flyers and passed them out to all of the homeowners on the hill, asked them to RSVP. That RSVP time is now shut down because tomorrow they will be doing the first round of inspections, and Saturday a second round of inspections. And so we have those scheduled out at this point. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands this is sort of a first try at seeing what we're able to do to really get a fire mitigation program going. We have about 25 respondents, which is pretty darn good for the Hill District. And the intent is they will go out over the next few days, give some feedback, and as an incentive, the town, as well as Eagle County, has now committed that they'll come in and will haul the material off There's a very specific way that people have to stack the material, and then we'll go in and we'll chip it, haul it up to the landfill in Pitkin, and we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it's a nice fuels reduction for the season. I do want to make sure that people understand that if you haven't signed up for the program, just because of the labor required, if you put stuff out at the curb, we won't be able to pick it up. So those 25 that did sign up, the sort of incentive or reward would be that you get that picked up. So I would say stay tuned. I'd like to see how this one goes, and maybe we're able to do more in the future. So looking forward to that. And then let's see. I think that's all I had. So Christy was going to walk us through a little bit. You had some information in your packet on the second quarter financials.
Spreadsheets, yummy.
Yes, absolutely. Aren't you guys excited?
I'll briefly set the stage on that. Our intent is that we kind of get on track with providing this to you each quarter of the year. We worked with the Finance Committee to come up with a form that we think works for you all. And if there are any suggested modifications to us, certainly let us know. It's a work in progress. But with that, Christy, if you want to talk them through it a little bit.
Absolutely. So my first gratitude that I'll start with the town of Basalt is really to Lisa Slanik, because she really worked these financials before I got here in large part. And we presented this information to the Finance Committee. I should go over here before I get yelled at. The Finance Committee on August 15th and received some really great feedback, but just wanted to thank Lisa for her work on this, and I think it's a really great start in moving towards these second quarter financials on a regular basis. And the other note I'll say is the Finance Committee looked through this in detail and had some really good thoughts and comments for the future that we'll continue to work through and develop some different strategies as far as making sure that we have the right finance reporting kind of outcome, looking at transparency, understandability, those kind of things, looking at restricted funds. Those were the kind of things we were talking about, capital funds, how those are separated out year to date, last year versus this year. So there's some other pieces that we'll look at for the future, but this is really an awesome report for where we're at the current time. I think it's great, and Lisa did a super job with it, and good feedback from the committee also. So when you look at, there's really two pages to this thing. The first page is really your general fund. On the left side is your revenues, and your right side is expenditures by department, okay? And so there's a percent of budget on the third column on the right for your revenue side. And so you can note that things are really kind of clipping fairly well as far as an overall revenue result for the June 30 financial. Because you would think, on average, about half a year, revenues would have been received in. And it's going to vary depending on which revenue it is, like your property tax you're going to receive in closer to the earlier part of the year, and some of your other ones you receive throughout the year. The one other thing I'll note on sales tax that isn't on this report is that we're trending about 8.3% above where we were at last year on our sales tax. So that was really positive news through July 31st. So, which is a little bit ahead of a budget as well, because I think we budgeted around 4 to 5% increase on our sales tax. So that's also good news on our budget, which is about 70% of our budget is the sales tax piece, okay? So if you go over to the right on the expenditures, just looking at overall, our expenditures are really trending under budget right now, which is really great, looking overall, like I said. And so there's no big alarms or anything like that. Everything is looking like we're going to fall below budget for this year. And we're still looking at doing some journal entries, Lisa and myself, and cleaning up a few accounts. And there might be some oddities in here still that we're still looking at finishing and completing for the next quarterly financial. So that's our next outcome for the next time. So if you look at the next page, which is your bond fund, this is where you would just do your bond repayments. This is just property tax in and bond repayments out. It's a very boring fund. I love boring.
on a financial level. And so that's trending fine in relation to budget as well. And your water fund, we still have some entries to do there, but we believe looking at, with Pete, the audit side on how our water fund did last year and where we're at year to date, it looks like we're trending fine on that fund as well. Okay. The other thing I was just gonna note is, as far as a focus for our next quarterly and looking into the future, is the way that I kind of think, and this is kind of scary to get into my mind a little bit, but just bear with me, is to look at 3 different buckets and how we deal with our financial reporting. The first is really looking at our capital improvements and where we're trending on those one-time costs. And so those kind of things are what we're delving into and trying to separate out on our financials and separate accounts, okay? Second part of that is our restricted funding and looking what is actually restricted for like post-sales tax and that kind of thing. And Susan, Ryan, the whole team has really been phenomenal in trying to help me decipher those things and to get a real good start on looking at keeping those restrictions, you know, and understanding those things completely. And the third then is your operating costs, is what you're calling your recurring expenditures. Those are the things that you're gonna have year over year, like your salaries and stuff. So we're going to try to separate those out for the future. Okay.
Great. Well, first of all, I just want to say, having just seen this for the first time, basically today, this is something we've been waiting for a long time. Something that, you know, is quarterly. I mean, I think we've been asking for it for 3 years or something like that. It's been a long time. And it's also is something that me, like a 7th grade level spreadsheet person, gets. And I think it's #1 importance that when you're putting together, especially the finance information, that any member of the community can come in and understand it. And I think that, I don't necessarily think it's on purpose, but I think finance people in general are comfortable with smoke and mirrors. Nobody else in the world is. We don't like smoke and mirrors. And so I really see this as a change for the better, and I personally appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. And yeah, and like I said, I need to give the credit, majority of the credit
You
to
and
finance-
Lisa, right.
to Lisa and,
Yeah.
and the finance committee, and thank you guys for all of your thoughts and Ryan's thoughts and moving in that direction for the committee too, so.
Anybody have questions or comments on the information? I'm sure you've already commented on
we
it.
looked at this
Okay.
just a month
Yes.
ago, it
Yeah,
seems.
good.
Yes, it was a while ago, but.
I think this is so helpful and again, something that we have been looking for, and so it's fantastic to have it. And then the next level, that's not related to the quarterly, but it is financial, is looking at our check register that's included in the packet, the last 3 pages, last 2 pages. And one of the questions that I have, or a request, is it has become a little bit more transparent with time. This is improving. But with the invoice GL account title, if there can be a little bit more information, for example, on this packet for DHM Design Corporation, which is check number 42035, it's just capital outlay. And it would be really fantastic to know what specific capital improvement that is going towards,
Okay.
rather than just a generic. And, you know, I could email and ask every single packet, what is that for? But it would just be more transparent to the public what that is for.
Okay.
Thanks for considering that idea.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'll look at, and I'll need to look at our system to see what it offers besides just the name of the vendor. If there is some way we can put some sort of a note on there.
Beautiful.
So that's what we'll look at.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay.
So we'll do a 3rd quarter?
Yes, the intent is that we have quarterly updates.
Okay, fantastic.
Wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. So, back to, the really, really fun part. Is it time for the audit presentation? Holy cow, that's gonna be really fun.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Yes, and so, so this is Pete Blair, our auditor.
Hi, Pete.
And welcoming him. He has traveled from Cedar Ridge, so thank you so much for being here.
It was a
tonight.
gorgeous drive.
Was it? I'm sure, yeah, good.
Did you
Good.
see some colors?
I did see a lot. It was very,
It's getting away
very
from us,
nice.
for sure.
A couple things, something a little bit different this year than we've had in the past is you were required to have what they call a single audit because you had federal assistance over $750,000. So anytime you get federal assistance over $750,000, then you gotta follow what they call the uniform guidance rules. I'm not sure that the finance department really knew that you had to have one. So what happened was, and we'll go over that report, some of the documentation in the folders just was not there. So if you go to the one that's actually bound, I'll wait till she passes them all out. Okay, this is the actual single audit report, the one that's bound. And the way that worked was you got about $2.2 million from CDOT to finish the underpass, of which I think 800,000 was state money, and then the remaining portion, I think it was about 1.3 million was federal dollars. And that's why this kicked in. If you actually go to this report, there's actually two opinions. The first opinion is on the basic financial statements on a governmental basis. We didn't have any problems with that. And if you go to pages 3 and 4, you actually have opinion on the actual federal program award. We did have one slight problem there was, we know you did it, but there was no documentation in the file to determine if you checked for the certified wages with United. So what I did was I actually had Lisa call, and she finally did get a report from, I think it was RFTA, that they did actually go through that process. The bad thing is you are required to monitor that. So that was the only thing. There is no questioning cost on that, but we do have to state that that was a finding. And it really became just a documentation thing. Everything else was fine. And if you go to page 5, it talks about the federal dollars that went through CDOT. And again, it was 1.3 million. They did something a little bit different too on the accounting side. They actually set up a contra account on your general ledger. Contra account, basically what happens is all the revenue and expenses went through the balance sheet. We would make a recommendation if you do another project like this that you might want to set up a separate fund for that so that you can actually see the revenue coming in from those who contributed and actually see the expenses go out. I think that's your recommendation on the capital that you just made. And I think that would make it a much clearer picture. So we've talked with that with Christy, and she understands that process. Everything else was fine.
Question, I would have thought those would have been restricted funds and accounted for separately anyway? Wasn't what happened?
Yeah, what they did was they set up a balance sheet account called the underpass. And basically, everything went through the balance sheet account, but none of the revenue and expenses got booked on the other side.
Okay.
And you'll see a little bit when we go through the other. It was accounted for, and all the expenditures tied out with United and everything else, but it would have been a lot cleaner if you just set up a separate fund for that. And then once that project was done, then you could just close that out.
Yeah.
So
okay.
it makes it a little bit better accounting-wise. So anyways, you had one finding, basically was documentation. We know they got done because we actually saw one of the reports from RFTD. If you go to the next packet, it's the called the Town of Basalt Audit Reporting Package. And basically, if you go to pages 1 and 2, this is a governance letter under the old SAS 114 required to the board. And if you go down about halfway down that page, you have a couple estimates in your audit because we're estimating depreciation costs based off the life of the asset. It may last longer, it may not. So it's really an estimate. And then there's one other estimate on the audit is under GASB 68, you have an FPPA plan with your police department. And so we're actually estimating the actuary study from that FPPA. In the past, I think last year, you had a net pension asset on that of about $1,300. It's not a big plan there. This year, actually went the opposite. You actually have a little bit of a net pension liability on that, about $25,000. We get the actuary study from the people who do the FPPA plan, and then we take your proportion to put it into your financial statements under GASB 68. If you go down to the last paragraph there, it talks about some sensitive disclosures. We'll go over those on the audit. There's 3 of them: deposit investments, bonds and loans, and then the pension plan. If you go to page 2, it actually talks a little bit about corrected and uncorrected in the statements. You corrected all those, and basically we had 7 audit adjustments. And that was basically mainly covers everything except for where you get to other audit findings and issues. We had talked to Judy in the past about her maintaining the depreciation schedules. Really, it's required by the client to do that. We've been doing it for you, so we're going to give you that information, and we'll actually upload it into an Excel program, and then you can maintain that as you go forward. If you go to pages after that, you're going to see a whole bunch of audit adjustments. Most of these audit adjustments we gave to Judy last year as far as on the water fund, but for some reason they weren't posted to the general ledger. If you go to footnote 6 and 7, it talks about picking up the line of credits, and it also talks about picking up the capital outlay that was not picked up because it went through that contra account. And Christy has really been working on me. She's had several questions on this, and she's doing a really great job because I think we've got most of them ironed out. So she's right on top of this. So. If you go to the managed report, I'm like some people, I like to actually see graphs and see how we actually do. So if you go to this managed report for the town of Basalt, if you go to the first graphs, it talks about positive operations. If you take that first column there, you're going to see the general fund. And you had budgeted, and I'm not sure, I think maybe Judy took out some of the restrictions on that, but you had budgeted that the ending fund balance would be about 1.9 million in the general fund. Actually ended up being about 7.3 million. It actually went up about 2 million compared to 2016. A lot of that difference was because we borrowed some money to do the underpass. So we have a line of credit, and it's about $2 million. If you go to the bond account, the bond account is actually in a negative position. It's actually got a negative balance of about 25,000. I think that they didn't quite budget that right, and me and Christy talked about that. It looked like when they did the budget process, and I'll show you when we get to the audit, that they only budget for part of the bond payments. And so what they did was, I think they budgeted for about 475,000 in the bond payments, but it actually was around 800,000. So we've talked about that, and we have an amortization schedule in the audit, so we can kind of go over that. But I think that's why the difference.
Are you
And-
gonna explain that more?
Yeah, what is they, when she did the budget, she thought that her ending fund balance would be about 881,000. But she only budgeted for debt service of about 475,000 when it was actually about 850,000.
But how does that all play out? Or,
Well, the way it plays out is that you have property taxes going into the bond account of about 900 and some thousand, but your debt service payments are a little bit more than that. So you may have to look through your budget process. It's pretty close, but you may have to look through the budget process, or you might have to put a little bit of funding into that to get out of that negative position.
got it. We'll talk more about that at budget probably.
Yeah, it was pretty close. In the past, it was a negative 3,400. It's actually climbed up to a negative 25.
And so we are not, as a town, defaulting on these?
No,
or-
no.
Okay,
Because basically what you're doing is you're borrowing, you basically borrowed from the general fund to pay off the difference.
sure.
Because you have what you call a combined cash account, so that's in a little bit of a negative position.
Great, thank you.
If you go to the Conservation Trust Fund, really close to what you budgeted and really close to your 2016 balance. And then if you go to the Water Fund, really close again. And the Water Fund's a little bit different for accounting purposes because it's on a net working capital basis. So really what you do is you only budget for capital outlay. You do not budget for depreciation costs. You really focus in on what the actual expenses are on a current basis. And then if you go to the next graph, operating revenues, you're gonna notice that you budgeted around 10 million, or 10.6 million. Actually ended up being about 12.6. Again, the biggest difference was the line of credit. And then if you go to the bond fund, this is where I think the mayor was asking, you budgeted only, and I'm not sure why they budgeted that way, but they only budgeted for 560,000 going into that, but you really had property taxes of 916,000. So, as you look forward to that budget, we can surely go over that with you.
Pete, is it possible that it failed to pick up one of the counties?
I'm really thinking, Ryan, that was the case.
Okay,
I think what they did was they might have only picked up the other county, not the other one.
yeah. So we got the revenue, but.
You
we
got
just
the
didn't
revenue.
budget, Yeah,
It was fine, but they just didn't budget for both sides, I think.
yeah.
Okay.
Can I just make one other note too, is we just have to look at what was approved by voters with that bond to see what we can mill, and then compare that with our bond costs. And then we may have to supplement that depending upon the answer to that question.
Yeah, and as those costs go down on that bond account, then you're gonna be fine anyways, because those costs the interest rates interest expense is gonna go down, so you're pretty even. So it'll balance out.
Yeah.
If you go to the Conservation Trust Fund, really close to the budget, and if you go to the Water Fund, really close to the budget. The big difference on the Water Fund is they were very conservative on the user charges, and you actually collected about 80-some thousand more. So that was a good thing. If you go to the next graph on operating expenses, you budget, and it's always safe to be on the other side, but you budgeted for about 13.7 million to be expended. You expended only about 11.6, that's why your fund balance increased. And then if you look at the bond fund, again, that's what we talked about already. They had budgeted only 570,000 expenses when it actually was about 937,000. Water fund was pretty close to what was budgeted.
And just to clarify, general includes restricted funds as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So we had talked about that with Christie because she says, we're showing this fund balance of 3 million, but really, we've got it pretty narrowed down to about 3.5 is what we're really looking at, it's available. So she's asking all the great questions. So yeah, it's really available, probably about 3.5, between 3.5 and 3.4. I do want to thank Lisa for all her help. She did help us out through a lot of the process because of the situation that happened. I'm going to briefly go over the audit report. We have what they call a CAFA report. It's a comprehensive annual financial report. I think it's a great thing because there's a lot of good information in that. I actually like the information in the back that gives demographics and how the fund balances have changed over the last 10 years. But if you go to B1 and B2, you had a clean opinion. We call it a clean opinion. Basically it says your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with governmental auditing standards. If you go to page B3 through that process, it's called the MD&A report, which is really the management discussion analysis report. I really like looking at that because it gives me comparisons of 16 and 17. So you'll see some graphs in there you can compare it to. You're not going to see a lot of differences except for on capital assets because you did a lot of capital outlay as far as the underpass, which was a $7 million project, so that's probably the biggest difference you'll see. You also have on page C1 and C2, it's the governmental-wide statements. And what that tried to do under the old GASB 34 was to say, let's bring everything in on a full accrual basis, all your assets, and see where you look. And that's what that's doing. I'm going to skip around a little bit and actually go to those 3 sensitive disclosures we talked about. And if you go to D9, we talk about cash and deposits, and at the end of 2017, the town had about 7.7 million in the bank. And everything is pretty well secured because of the Public Deposit Protection Act, and you have, most of your money was invested in Color Trust, which is kind of, it's a governmental asset pool, it's AAA rated, and there's really no risk there. And so you had about 6.3 million in that. If you go to D10, it actually gives you a list of all the bonds and loans payable outstanding by the town. Probably the biggest difference here is if you go to the additions, you had some additions as far as the line of credits for the affordable housing and for the underpass. We had briefly discussed that. I think Ryan had some good points on that, that we might want to consider maybe paying some of that line of credit off because of the interest rates on that. And you do have the money available to do that, but that's something that you can look at on the finance committee. I think that line of credit, the interest rates on that was, sorry, I just had that.
3.25, I believe.
3.25, you're right. So you're probably not quite making that as far as interest on your loan, on your money, so you might want to look at paying some of that. I think that you actually have a resolution to pay so much per year on that, so. If you go to note 9, it talks about GASB 68, and it talks about the actuary study for the policeman's pension plan. If you ever really want to fall asleep at night, I would recommend you probably read that. I'm sorry. Because there's a lot of assumptions in there. Probably the biggest assumption is on the actuary study, how much money, how much interest that they think they're going to make on the plan. They kind of run that down, and that's why you went into a little bit of a negative position, because they found out it was unrealistic that the percentages that they thought they would make on that, and so they scaled that back down. So if you go to page D17, and it's the end of that footnote number 9, you can see how those assumptions change as as your money increases or it decreases. So the more money it makes on the plan, then the better position you're in. And Chrissy's probably aware of this because she was working on school districts. That was my pet peeve. I'm on the school board. I'm president of our school board in Delta County. My pet peeve is that PRA right now, our unfunded, I think for our school district was over 85 million. So we're picking up this huge paper loss that kind of skews our financial statements, I think. And I'm sure you had the same problem. Yours was in the 80s, millions, and
Yeah, after that, we had a negative fund balance, so.
yeah, we have a negative fund balance too, so.
So it was crazy.
So we tell them, take that out, we're in a positive position.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think what GASB 68 was trying to say is, where are we with our unfunded mandates and how do they play out? It's kind of eye-opener. Everything else looked great. Town of Basalt's in good shape.
Yippee!
Doing a lot of projects that you ought to be very commended for. One of the things we do look at as auditors is when we look at your capital assets, it's always a good thing if you're putting more back in investments than your depreciation cost is, because that tells you that you're reinvesting back into the town. And I can tell you over the last years, you've always done that. So you've done a great job with that. And so I have to commend you on that.
Thank you.
So.
Well, I'm going to open it up for questions from anybody that has a question. Good job.
Well, thank you, and I still want to say thanks to Lisa, and also thanks to Christy, because I think she's going to be really, really good. And she's asking a whole bunch of great questions that she's putting a little bit of pressure back on us. But that's good. She wants to understand it, and that's a good thing.
We think she's going to be really, really good, too.
I think she will be.
Oh, thank you. And thanks to Pete for the help in the transition time and getting all those files to me and helping me to understand all that information. So I appreciate your time.
And if you need anything else, you know where we're at, so.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
For your presentation.
It was a great coincidental timing of the audit and transition of staff, so.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okey-doke.
We still have a resolution.
Oh, we do have a resolution.
Item, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, that's right. That is item number 6A.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt resolution number 21, series of 2018.
A second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Good catch, Pam, as always. Thank you very much. Okay, our next item, actually, Christie's here. It's 7 o'clock. Would you like to come up and talk to us about?
I'm just gonna make the announcement like we talked about.
Okay.
I didn't make it earlier. As the outreach coordinator for the Hope Center. I was actually at the Carbondale Middle School, just there to let parents know what we do. And September Suicide Awareness Month, and so we have a few events, and I just wanted to let you know about them. We have next Monday, Allison Daly, who is she's a Pathfinders Director, grief counselor, and she will be talking about the grieving process. And I'll actually be sharing my story as well as some other people that reached out to the Hope Center. And
Where is this happening?
that would be helpful. Picken County Library.
At the library, okay.
Yes, and that is free to the public, 5:30 to 6:30. And also, next Thursday, we have a suicide awareness class, and that will be at Third Street Center, same time, 5:30 to 6:30, and that's free. And the class is designed for the community, to educate everyone on how to approach someone and get the conversation going. And I just want to share the importance of expressing this to our community and getting more people aware of this. Because as we all know, it's everyone knows someone or has been touched by this in the valley. And it's just very important, these classes. And I often find I get frustrated as the outreach coordinator. Everyone supports mental health, but no one wants to talk about it. So it's But I do have a quick story. Today, I went down to Denver to get a car, and this gentleman who helped me, he didn't help me the other day, I apologize for being so out of it because I had to get up at 5. And he said, oh, I woke up and I knew I was going to have major anxiety today. And I thought, I didn't tell him I said I worked for the Hope Center. And he actually just openly talked, and then led into how he talked about being suicidal, show the cuts on his wrist, and that's getting the conversation going. And he talked about his frustration with trying to find help in Denver, and I was able to give him some resources. And it's as simple as that, it wasn't a depressing conversation, it just started talking. And that's why it's so important for people to learn more techniques and just talk.
Chrissy, do we have anything happening in Basalt? I heard Aspen and Carbondale.
Well, I did, but the date conflict.
Okay.
So
So
I'm
when
working on that.
maybe when something else comes up, you can give us a heads up.
Yes, and I will have one coming up. So
As-
I'm telling you about the other ones in the valley.
Great.
It all
Thank
happened
you.
yesterday. So
Thank you very much for coming in.
yes, good to see you all, and thank you.
You're running around doing
Yeah,
this
saving you
everywhere.
time during a meeting.
Thank you, dear. Okay, our next item is public hearing and second reading of ordinance 14, an ordinance of the town granting a PUD amendment to the Mid-Valley Business Center, special review, approval for the operation of a nail salon at 20 Sunset Drive, Unit 7. James?
Yeah, thank you. This is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance. We have the applicant here this evening, Ishmael Garber, with us. And the application that is subject to the ordinance is an application request for a minor PUD amendment and a special review to operate a nail salon at 20 Sunset Drive, unit number 7 in the Mid-Valley Business Center. Excuse me. As background, that was described at the first reading. The applicant applied for a business license to operate a nail salon at 20 Sunset Drive, and staff determined that a nail salon was not a use that was currently permitted in the Mid-Valley Business Center PUD because it was an old PUD that was approved in Eagle County and then annexed into the town. And even though nail salon would have been a permitted use in the underlying industrial zone district, it wasn't currently allowed in the PUD. So the applicant decided to make an application to amend the PUD to include the nail salon use as a special review use. And the applicant concurrently applied for a special review to operate the nail salon in Unit 7 of 20 Sunset Drive. As was noted at the last meeting, this is the building at 20 Sunset Drive. It's at the intersection of Sunset Drive and Willits Lane. And the distillery is up here for vicinity, and this is Willits Lane running right here.
Why would you refer to the distillery for all of us?
Well, it's the best kind of
kidding.
landmark in the area.
That's all right, it's all right.
It's mentioned in our financial report too, as one of the businesses.
See, it's an easy landmark to get to.
It's a landmark, okay.
There you go. In reviewing the application, the Planning and Zoning Commission felt that the proposed use was compatible with the surrounding uses, as there are other personal service uses in the PUD, as well as the underlying zoning would allow for a nail salon. In terms of parking, there are 6 parking spaces allocated for the 600 square foot salon space, which would meet the parking requirements. And then with regard to lighting and signage, we've got a condition in the draft ordinance that the applicant would need to meet the code requirements and retroactively apply for a sign permit because the sign's installed, which the applicant has applied for the sign permit. Staff has that. And then in terms of the affordable housing requirements, there aren't any affordable housing requirements because the space is an existing commercial space and the applicant is not proposing to increase the commercial square footage. So overall, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the requests with the conditions that you have in your draft ordinance. So this evening, staff would recommend taking applicant comments, taking public comments because it is a public hearing, and then providing council discussion. Ultimately, staff would recommend approval of the ordinance on second reading. Ishmael, do you have additional comments for council?
A little nervous, that's okay.
You don't even have to do anything, Ishmael.
I know, he does it all. I should pay him now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, if there's no other applicant comments, we'll open the public hearing at 7:04. Is there anyone in the public that has any comments regarding this application? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and go to council for questions, comments, motions, etc.
Any comments?
I'm ready to motion. You want a motion?
Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 14, series of 2018 on second reading.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Done.
Done.
Go get some nails,
It's
man.
over.
Go do nails.
Nothing to worry about.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care, Ishmael.
Yes, ma'am.
I like it. You can drop your dog off at Debbie's and get your other dogs done at Ishmael's.
Too fun. Okay, another public hearing and second reading, an ordinance of the town granting a franchise to Black Hill Gas Distribution. Ryan Mahoney,
Yes, again, hello.
hello.
I'll just start off, and if Jeff wants to fill in any details that I might miss.
Do we have a gas person here?
No, I don't think so. Oh, you are here, hello. We've never met in
Would you
person,
like to
so-
come up? Yeah, come on up to the mic. He tried to ignore you, but we didn't let him.
I just figured you guys were, audience members, sorry.
Like the Black
Yeah,
Hills
did you
hat.
notice his hat?
No, I,
From that front.
the camouflage.
Thank you for coming in.
That's it.
And
Gotcha.
wading through the other.
So, excuse me for
Information.
that, sorry. So anyway, last time we went over this briefly. This, if you recall, is our third franchise. All of our franchises came due this year, so it'll be another 10 years before we have to talk about these. But essentially what this does is grant a 10-year franchise, which is in accord with our charter that limits it to 10 years. The franchise fee that we would be getting is essentially a continuation of what we've been getting from them. And so a couple of the quick changes, one of the things that we as the town will be required to provide is an update of our mapping and GIS each time we change the town boundary. And so that way, or if there's new developments in the town, and pass it along to them so that they would know to build those according to our franchise fee, and then give that over to us so that nothing is missed. And another slight change in here was the insurance. Black Hills is self-insured. In the past, we had it that it was an insurance company, and they had certain limits that they had to meet. But in this instance, that was a change that we had agreed to based on their current situation there. And I think that was about the extent of the big changes. Is there any other significant ones? One of the things that we wanted to put in there was to make sure that as they're doing excavation work in our roads, things like that they are getting permits. They don't get charged for the permits, but we want to make sure if somebody's in our road that we're aware of it. And then of course that it gets put back in a workmanship like manner, so that somebody's front yard or our street or whatever doesn't it isn't compromised. So
Is
with
that included in there? I'd really like it to be, because I had
Yes.
that occur on
Yeah.
my property with the high-speed DSL that was put in or whatever.
Mhm.
There's now a giant dip
Fiber
in the
optic.
road. Yeah, the fiber
Oh, the
optic.
fiber.
Yeah,
No, that is in there.
great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Some settling may occur.
It did.
Anything else?
Nope. I don't know if he's got anything.
I think you hit the highlights.
Okay.
We went over a lot of the bullet points on first reading, and there weren't, I think, answered any questions then, but I don't have anything else to add.
And do you folks have anything to say at all?
I'm Carly West with Black Hills Energy. I just want to say thank you to Ryan and Jeff for their work on the franchise agreement and moving forward with it. We appreciate the opportunity to serve the town of Basalt and look forward to continuing to do so.
Did I see you around at the fire
You saw me at
Meetings?
every one of the collaborator meetings for a
Yeah,
month.
I
Yeah.
was thinking that you
Yeah.
guys looked familiar. I guess it was you that
Yep.
looks familiar.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So my name is Todd Ellsworth. I'm the local supervisor for the area, so I'm
Anyway,
responsible for this
in
area.
case somebody didn't thank you at the first meeting, thank you so much for, I mean, you all risked life and limb, just like the firefighters did out there in the middle of the stuff, so thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing. Did I do this already? No.
Nope.
Okay. I'll open the public hearing at 7:10. Is there anybody in the public that has comment regarding this? Okay, hearing none, we'll close it again at the same time. Council? Any motions, questions?
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance 15, series of 2018 on second reading.
Good job. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We were only one meeting off from hitting the August mark, so. Given the fire, I think we did pretty good. Yeah. Thank you, Carly.
Okey dokey.
Real quick, I'd like to
Sir.
thank Ryan and Jeff for putting that together, because I know they actually did research through a couple other towns and pull out some stuff that was beneficial to us that they fought for, so I just wanted to commend them for really going for Basalt.
I assumed you guys rounded all these questions up on first reading, because there are always some questions, and so,
They
what
did.
he said.
Jeff, I don't know if you heard, I was commending you guys for putting this together and drawing from other towns that had just done it. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. The next one's a public hearing and second reading of ordinance 16 of 2018, an ordinance of the town amending chapter 6, article 2 of the municipal code to delegate authority to the town clerk for certain liquor licensing matters and amend educational requirements for licensees. Jeff and Pam. Pam will soon be in charge of all controlled substances. The world, too. So Jeff or Pam, whoever wants to run with us.
This is a second reading on a code amendment to allow for PAM to issue tasting permits. Liquor stores have their license, but they can also have tastings, but they need to get a permit to do that. That's the type of thing that is currently set up to come to council for review. This would delegate the authority to PAM to do that. This also does just a couple of other little cleanup changes in that section of the code. And I don't think there are any questions on first reading that we needed to answer, but if there are any now, happy to answer them.
Anybody? Questions? This is a great idea. I mean, some of this stuff was just busy work for us, so it's appreciated. And I know Pam will need to probably attend all tastings from here on out, and I'll be right by her side as an official of the town. Okay, this is also a public hearing, so we will open the public hearing at 7:10-ish. Anybody? Close the public hearing. Council.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 16, series of 2018 on second reading.
Second.
Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys. Wow.
We moved through some.
Okay, now, just one thing,
great-
does anybody have any questions on the, since you had brought this up about accounts payable, any questions on accounts payable, advanced agendas, correspondence to the town? Okay, I think we're out of business. Thank you so much, everybody. We are adjourned. Awesome.
Yay, good work, everyone.